Welcome to my channel. Today, we will learn about a very special place. We will talk about the history of the Netherlands. It is a great story about how a wet, muddy swamp became a very rich and powerful country. You will hear about brave people, big oceans, beautiful ships, and clever ideas. Please listen carefully to the simple words. This will help you upgrade your English listening skills. Let us start this amazing journey together. Long, long ago, the land we call the Netherlands was not a country. It was just a big place with a lot of water and soft mud. It was a very wet and very cold place to live. There was water from the rain that fell from the sky. There was water from the big rivers that came from the mountains. And there was big water from the angry, cold sea. Can you imagine living in a place with no dry land? When you walked outside, the ground was not hard. The ground was soft, sticky mud. Your feet went deep down into the cold, wet dirt. It was a very hard and dangerous place to live. There were no roads for walking. There were no big houses to sleep in. There were only small plants, green grass, seabirds, and a lot of fish in the water. The winters were very dark and very long. The wind blew very fast and hard from the ocean. The rain fell down almost every single day. The sea was often angry and very dangerous. Sometimes the seawater came up very high and covered the whole land. It was not a safe place for anyone. But some brave people decided to come and live here anyway. They were poor people looking for a new home. They wanted a free place where nobody would tell them what to do. How did they stay alive in all this dangerous water? Let me tell you their clever secret. They used their own hands and the heavy dirt. They started to make small, round hills out of mud, clay, and grass. They called these special mud hills Terps. When the angry sea came high, the water covered the flat land. But the people quickly ran to the top of their mud hills. The cold water could not reach them up there. They built small, simple houses made of wood and grass on top of these hills. They kept their animals like cows and sheep on the hills with them. It was a very simple and poor life, but it was their own free life. Remember, these early people had no big machines or tractors. They only had simple tools made of wood, bone, and stone. Every day they went out in small boats to catch fish for food. They drank warm milk from their cows. They made clothes from the thick wool of their sheep to stay warm. Sometimes very rich and strong men from other countries came to look at this wet land. The famous Romans came from the warm south. The Romans were very strong soldiers and had a huge, powerful army. But when the Romans saw the mud, the rain, and the cold water, they did not like it at all. A famous Roman writer visited this place and wrote a story about the people. He said the people looked like poor, wet birds sitting on top of small dirt islands in the sea. He thought they were very strange people. The Romans built some small military camps near the rivers, but they did not stay everywhere. This wet land was too hard and too messy to control. So the mud people were mostly left alone in their cold world. They were happy to be free and to live their hard lives. But every single day was a big fight against the water. If a very big storm came from the sea, the water could wash away their small dirt hills. Serious, brave people and their animals died in the cold, dark water during these bad storms. But the people who stayed alive became very, very strong. They learned exactly how the seawater moved. They learned how the strong wind blew across the flat land. They slowly started to love their difficult, wet home. This very hard life made them brave, clever, and patient. They knew they had to work together every day. Remember, if they did not help each other build the hills, the sea would come and take everything away. This teamwork was the very beginning of the country we now call the Netherlands. It was not a rich or beautiful place at all in the beginning. It was just wind, mud, freezing water, and very strong people working together. This is how the amazing story of a great country started. Keep listening to hear what these hard-working people did next. Time passed, and there were more people living in the wetland. The people wanted more space to grow their food and keep their cows. But they could not grow food in the water. They needed dry land. So, what did they do? They started to do something very big and very clever. They stopped building small dirt hills. Instead, they started to build very long, strong walls made of heavy earth. They called these long earth walls dikes. A dike is like a big wall that stands between the sea and the land. When the sea gets angry and high, the water hits the dike and stops. The heavy wall keeps the water away from the houses and the grass. Building these big walls was very hard work. Men, women, and children all worked together in the cold dirt. They used wheelbarrows and spades to move the earth. They put heavy stones and wood together to make the walls very strong. They had to watch the walls every day and every night. If a wall had a small hole, the sea could break it and drown the whole village. Slowly, they put walls all around big pieces of wetland. But the land inside the walls was still very wet. It was full of rainwater and old river water. How could they push the water out of the land? This is when they built their most famous invention. They built the beautiful wooden windmills. A windmill is a big machine that works with the wind. The wind in this country always blows strong from the sea. The wind turns the big wooden arms of the windmill. Inside the windmill, the turning arms make a big wheel move. This wheel scoops up the heavy water from the lowland. It pushes the water up and throws it over the wall into the river. It was a very slow job, but it worked very well. Day and night, the windmills turned in the wind, pumping the water away. Soon, the wet mud slowly became dry green grass. The people were very, very happy. They called this new dry land a polder. Now they had beautiful, safe land for their animals. Their black and white cows ate the rich, sweet grass. The cows gave a lot of thick white milk. The people learned how to make something very delicious with this milk. They learned how to make yellow cheese. Today, Dutch cheese is famous all over the world, but it started here on this new land. With dry land, they also started to build real strong towns. They built long canals. A canal is like a road, but it is made of water. They used small boats on the canals to move heavy things like cheese and wood from one town to another town. Moving things by water was much faster and easier than walking in the mud. People started to buy and sell many things in these new towns. They bought fish, wood, salt, and warm clothes. The towns began to grow bigger and richer. The people were proud of what they did. They used to say a very famous sentence. They said, "God created the world, But the Dutch created the Netherlands. This means they made their own country out of the water. But the water was always waiting outside the walls. They could never stop working or stop watching. If the wind stopped blowing, the windmills stopped working and the water came back. If the sea storm was too big, it could still break the heavy walls. They lived in danger every single day. This constant danger made the people very close to each other. It did not matter if you were a rich man or a poor farmer. If the wall broke, everyone's house would wash away. So everyone had to help take care of the water walls. They learned to talk to each other and fix problems together. This way of working together became a very important part of their culture. It made their society very strong and very smart. They finally had their own dry land. Let us see who comes next to try and take this land away from them. For a long time, the Dutch people were happy building their land and making money. But they were not completely free. The land belonged to a very powerful king who lived far away in Spain. His name was King Philip. King Philip was a very strong and very strict man. The King of Spain wanted all the money from the rich Dutch towns. He asked the Dutch people to pay very high taxes. A tax is money you must give to the government or the king. The Dutch people worked very hard for their money, and they did not want to give it away to a king far away. Also, King Philip and the Dutch people had different ideas about religion. Religion is what people believe about God. The Spanish king wanted everyone to go to the Catholic Church, but many Dutch people wanted to read the Bible in their own new way. The king was very angry about this. He sent strong soldiers from Spain to the Netherlands to punish the people. The Spanish soldiers were very cruel. They hurt many people and burned down many houses. The Dutch people were very afraid, but they were also very angry. They decided they would not listen to the Spanish king anymore. They decided to fight for their own land, their own money, and their own religion. This was the start of a very long and terrible war. This war lasted for 80 years. That is a very, very long time for a war. Fathers fought in the war, and then their sons fought in the war, and then their grandsons fought too. The Dutch people needed a good leader to help them fight. They found a very smart and brave man named William of Orange. William of Orange became the father of their country. He told the people to be brave and to stand together against the strong Spanish army. The Spanish army was much bigger and had better weapons. The Spanish soldiers marched onto the dry land and surrounded the Dutch cities. They stopped all food from going inside the cities. The people inside were very hungry and very scared. But the Dutch people had a secret weapon. Do you know what their secret weapon was? Let me tell you this clever trick. Their secret weapon was the water. They remembered that they made the land dry by building walls. So, when the Spanish soldiers came close, the Dutch people went to the big walls. They broke their own dikes on purpose. The cold, deep seawater rushed back over the farmland. The Spanish soldiers did not know how to swim in the cold, muddy water with heavy metal armor. The Spanish army had to run away from the water. Then the Dutch people used their small, flat boats to sail right over the flooded farms to bring bread and fish to the hungry cities. It was a very smart and brave thing to do. They destroyed their own beautiful land to save their freedom. The fighting was very hard, and William of Orange was killed by a bad man. The Dutch people were very sad and cried for a long time, but they did not stop fighting. They remembered William's words and kept fighting for many more years. Slowly, year after year, the Dutch pushed the Spanish soldiers away. They built a very strong army and a navy with fast ships. Finally, after 80 long years of blood and tears, the Spanish king gave up. Spain said the Netherlands was a free country. The people were so happy they danced in the streets. They were finally free to make their own choices, read their own books, and keep their own money. They were now a real independent country. They proved that a small group of brave people could beat a huge empire. Listen to the next part to hear how these free people became the richest people in the world. After winning their big war for freedom, something amazing happened to the small country. The Netherlands entered a time called the Golden Age. A golden age is a time when a country becomes very, very rich and very successful. But how did a small country of farmers become so rich? The answer is very simple: ships and trade. The Dutch people were always very good at sailing boats on their rivers and canals. Now they decided to build very big, very strong ships. They bought cheap wood from cold countries in the north. They brought the wood to the Netherlands and built hundreds of fast ships. They built ships faster and cheaper than any other country in the whole world. Then brave sailors got on these big ships and sailed far, far away. They sailed across the big, dangerous oceans. They wanted to go to a place called Asia. Asia was a magical place for European people back then. In Asia, there were things you could not find in Europe. There were beautiful clothes made of silk. There were beautiful blue and white cups for drinking tea. But the most important things were the spices. Do you know what spices are? Think about pepper, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Today, spices are very cheap and you put them in your food every day. But a long time ago, spices were as expensive as pure gold. Without refrigerators, meat in Europe got bad and tasted terrible very fast. The spices made the bad meat taste very good. The Dutch ships sailed for many months through terrible storms to reach Asia. Many sailors got sick and died on the dark ships. But the ships that came back brought a lot of spices. They sold the spices in Europe for a lot of gold and silver money. Because the business was growing so big, the Dutch had a very clever idea. They started a huge business company. It was called the VOC. The VOC was the first big international company in the world. It was like a very powerful giant. The VOC had its own big army, its own fast ships, and its own money. Anyone in the Netherlands could buy a small piece of the company. If the company made money selling spices, the people got money back. This made many, many people very rich. The money flowed into the Netherlands like a big river of gold. The small mud country became the center of the whole world. The Dutch ships sailed everywhere, not just Asia. They went to Africa, they went to America, and they went to the cold Arctic Sea. They found new lands and put their names on the maps. They built a small town in America and called it New Amsterdam. Today, we call that famous city New York. The ports in the Netherlands were completely full of ships from all over the world. You could smell pepper, coffee, sugar, and tea everywhere in the air. The Dutch bought everything cheaply and sold it for more money. You can see how they used all their new money in their beautiful cities. Because of all the ships and spices, the Netherlands became incredibly rich. They had more money than the big kings of France or Spain. When people have a lot of money, they want to buy beautiful things and build beautiful houses. The biggest city, Amsterdam, grew very fast. To make more space for houses, they built beautiful new canals in the shape of a half circle. They dug the water canals by hand. Along these water streets, the rich merchants built very tall, very thin houses. The houses had big, beautiful windows. They put big windows in their houses because they wanted everyone to see how nice their rooms were. They bought beautiful wooden furniture from faraway countries. They covered their floors with rich, soft carpets from the East. But the most famous thing they bought was art. The Golden Age was a wonderful time for painting. In other countries, painters only painted pictures for the church or the king. But in the Netherlands, normal people had money. Bakers, doctors, and people who sold fish wanted pictures for their own walls. They wanted pictures of real things, not just religious stories. They wanted pictures of their families, their rich food, and their calm rivers. This country produced some of the greatest painters in the history of the world. Have you ever heard the name Rembrandt? He was a genius who knew how to paint beautiful light and dark shadows. When you look at his pictures, the people look real and alive. Another famous painter named Vermeer painted quiet scenes of women reading letters or pouring milk. His paintings make normal, everyday life look magical and perfect. The painters painted thousands and thousands of pictures during this time. Besides paintings, the Dutch people went crazy for something very strange. Can you guess what it was? It was a small flower. They fell in love with a flower called the tulip. The tulip came from a faraway land called Turkey. The Dutch loved the bright red, yellow, and purple colors of the tulips. Soon, everyone wanted to buy tulip bulbs to plant in their gardens. A bulb is the round seed of the flower. The price of the bulbs went up and up and up. People went crazy. Some rare tulip bulbs became more expensive than a whole beautiful house in Amsterdam. People sold their businesses just to buy one flower bulb, hoping to sell it for more money later. This was called tulip mania. But one day, suddenly, nobody wanted to buy them at that high price anymore. The price crashed down to zero in one day. Many people lost all their money and became very poor again just because of a flower. It was a big lesson about the danger of greed. But even after the tulip crash, the country was still very beautiful and full of culture. They printed books that other countries did not allow. Smart thinkers and scientists came to the Netherlands because it was safe and free. It was a time of light, money, and big ideas. Let us finish our story by looking at the country today. After the Golden Age, things slowly changed. The Netherlands became a quieter place. In the year 1953, a terrible thing happened. It was a cold winter night, and a massive storm blew in from the ocean. The wind was stronger than ever before. The heavy seawater pushed against the old dirt dikes. The walls broke. The cold, dark water rushed in very fast while people were sleeping in their beds. It was a huge disaster. Many towns were completely underwater, and many people and farm animals drowned. The Dutch people woke up to a terrible tragedy. They were heartbroken and very sad. But just like their grandfathers in the mud long ago, they did not give up. They said, "This will never, ever happen again." They used modern science and big machines to start a massive building project. They called it the Delta Works. The Delta Works is one of the biggest and most amazing engineering projects in the whole world. They built huge steel and concrete doors across the sea rivers. When the sea is calm, the big doors are open, and fish and boats can go through. But when a dangerous storm comes from the sea, computers close the massive steel doors. The doors lock tight, and the angry water cannot come inside the country. It is like a super shield for the whole nation. Today, thanks to these big walls, the Netherlands is one of the safest places in the world. Now, when you visit the Netherlands, you see a beautiful modern country. It is still very flat, and it is still very green. You can still see old wooden windmills standing next to the water, But now there are also tall, modern wind turbines making clean electricity. The people ride millions of bicycles everywhere instead of driving cars. They still sell more flowers and cheese than almost anyone else. The country is very small on the map, but it does very big things. They know how to grow a lot of food in a very small space using clever science. They help other countries around the world who have problems with water and flooding. The story of the Netherlands teaches us a great lesson. It shows us that you do not need a big country or easy land to be great. With hard work, clever ideas, and by helping each other, people can build a beautiful world out of nothing but mud and water. Thank you so much for listening to this amazing history. I hope you liked the story and learned some new English words today.